How many people you guys here actually know about Frank and Oak? Okay, see, most of you guys. What's interesting is that I want to kind of tell you guys about like our brand story and basically how we got to here today. And I want to talk about experiences as well, and how experiences are kind of redefining fashion and the way that men are actually shopping. So I'm really happy because I'm actually joined today by one of my good friends. Step in here, step in here. Ali Asaria, who's actually the CEO and founder of Tulip. And we're sort of going to have a talk about like how is technology changing experiences and how is that impacting the way that men are shopping in today's world. And I'm going to start by talking a little about the Frank and Oak story and how we got to this point. And then I'll let Ali actually complete to talk to us about the technology part of that and how does technology come into play. So the interesting thing about Frank and Oak is that we were actually started about 3 years ago in Montreal. So we're a Canadian company, which is why maybe some of you guys don't know about us. The company was started by myself and one of my good friend, Isham. And in some ways, just like Alexandre, we just wanted to create cool clothes for regular guys like us. And we were really passionate about storytelling. And in some ways, when we created Frank and Oak, we didn't really look at, big brands or like retail companies as a reference. We looked at media companies as a reference. We looked at Vice.com. We looked at companies like Monocle. And that was our reference basically to build our company. And in some ways, our vision has always been to make the lives of our customer better, to help them look better and feel better about themselves. So what's happened in the last 3 years, the company has grown tremendously. And this is something that's really interesting because Frank and Oak has grown in the shadows, outside of the industry, outside of the media. And in some ways, we were able to build an audience without anyone knowing it. And I think this is really something that's telling about the world that we live in. So in the last year alone, we actually sold over 700,000 products that we designed internally, sourced, and actually shipped to our customer via our company-owned channels. Frank and Oak is not a company that wholesales. Everything that we do is direct to the consumer. Why? Because we're an experience company. Now, the thing that's interesting is that I think finally people are starting to notice, and we were actually named by Fast Company as one of the top 10 most innovative retail companies in the world this year, with the likes of Warby Parker and Pinterest. And the question I always ask myself, and you should ask yourself, is what is so innovative about Frank and Oak? And I think the thing that's different about Frank and Oak is that we were always an experience-first company. What makes us different, what makes us special in the industry is that we create cool experiences that guys want to come in and they want to repeat and repeat. What is that experience, right? So we have a chart here that we use at our company to kind of group all the activities that we do at Frank and Oak. Content, products, and then personal service. We want to create a unique experience that's powered by technology across all three of those areas, but it is the combination of all three of those together in a very seamless, simple, and easy to use way that makes it interesting. And to take that men's experience and to funnel it across all these new channels that our customers are using is kind of what makes it really innovative, right? So I want to talk a little bit about how we're doing things a little bit differently. So let's start with content. The way that Frank and Oak built its audience is the same way that, let's say, Vice.com built its audience. From the beginning, we saw ourselves as a media company, so we created original content. We have a full editorial team that's curating playlists, that's creating magazine content. We have actually a published magazine that's in newsstand. And what's interesting about that is that the 27-year-old city customer that we're targeting, he actually really touches Frank and Oak a lot. Even though we don't have stores, we're not present in bigger stores, we're not necessarily that present in magazines, he sees us on Vice.com. He sees our magazine in his local cafe. So in some ways, although most of you guys don't know about Frank and Oak, to that guy who lives, say, in Brooklyn, Frank and Oak is actually one of the biggest brands in the world. And I think that's something that's really interesting about the power of content into shaping the brand values and the realities that our customer currently lives in. Now, the one thing about content that's interesting is that instead of just launching content all the time, because we saw ourselves as a media company first, we decided to group all of our content, all of our articles, into monthly issues. Why monthly? Because that's the way the magazine do it. And then when we went ahead and we started designing collections, not based on seasons, fall, winter, not based on the fashion calendar, but based on monthly content calendar, right? So what does that look like for the customer? What it basically look like is you go on frankenoak.com on the first of the month. We have for you basically rich content that basically tells you about the things that you should be looking at, the clothes that you should be buying, the kind of lifestyle you want to be living, and combined with that, we have the products that you can buy. We do small collections on a monthly basis in short runs, so the products actually will sell out across the next 45 days. We repeat that 12 times a year. By doing that, we're basically making the product experience into a content experience, and we found that, especially when it comes to regular guys that are not that informed about fashion, but that do want to look better, it's a very engaging and influential way of basically creating a relationship with that customer. Now, the last piece that we've been working on in the last year is we realized, okay, we have the content, so we have the influence. We have the cool product that we design ourselves, so we have a share of your wallet. Now we really want to empower you. We want to help you to live a better life. And how do we do that? Is we built a team of style advisors that all of our customers can reach directly. Now, what's interesting about that is that having personal shoppers or style advisors is not necessarily that innovative on its own. A lot of high-end stores like Nordstrom offer that. What's interesting is that via technology, we're bringing that experience to some regular 23-year-old guy that lives in Minneapolis who never felt that he was fashionable before. We're creating this world around him and providing him with a personal stylist so that he can too, when he's buying a $55 shirt, feel like he's looking better and that he's informed about the world that he lives in, right? So how do we take that experience and how do we get to that experience to our customer? The thing that's interesting about Frank & Oak is that we're really focused on mobile because as our vision of being your personal advisor, what's closest to you than your mobile device? Right? I see a lot of you guys that are basically on your mobile right now, even though you're listening to me, right? So in some ways, a lot of brands and retailers saw mobile as another channel. And I think that we just need to stop thinking about this whole like this channel, that channel, and like what's the next channel. We have to assume that our customer will be living in a world where he has like 5 or 6 screens, that he has wearables, that he has basic mobile. And how do we make our brand experience less like a transactional experience, but like we're really part of their lives? And that's where we see mobile as having a huge impact. Now, one of the reasons why I actually got Ali to come here, and one of the things that a lot of people have been talking about, is this whole transition of online retailers going to brick and mortar, and how that was like a big thing. And I don't really understand why that's such a big thing, right? When we launched our brand, we never said that we were pure e-commerce. We just said we want to build a brand that has a lot of media to it. And what's the best channel to communicate media? Well, online, of course, is the best channel to communicate media. But when you think about our customer, a customer who's globally connected and yet wants to go to that small local bar where he knows, basically, the owner of that bar, it really makes a lot of sense to create these spaces where we can bring our customer. But when you start thinking about decoupling inventory with content, when you start looking at fashion companies more like media companies, the one thing that's interesting is that you can do a lot of new things with that store that traditional retailers will not do and cannot do. So as an example, community is one of the values of Frank & Oak. Everything we do involves our community. So we decided that all of our stores, half of it would be dedicated to community. You guys can see a little picture there. That's actually our Toronto store, which we opened in November. We actually, half of our store is actually a bar, through which we can actually have programming and content, and it's a way to bring our digital content into real life. So now that you're that guest artist that you're looking at in your magazine, you can actually meet him in person via our retail location. The second aspect is personal service. Well, I put a big emphasis on how, especially when it comes to men, giving them that extra guidance, that extra push of like, I think you should be wearing this, this looks great on you, is so important that we definitely wanted to bring that personal service actually also into our store. What's interesting is that most people, when they think about a company like Frank & Oak that's highly digital, they would have said, it feels like Frank & Oak would have that SelfServe app, right? That you could basically be able to go, get your stuff, have some beacons technology around you, and self-check out your product. The truth is actually that was the complete opposite that we went. We understood that if our customer is going to walk all the way to our store, we want to create a real experience. We want it to be authentic. We want them to talk to guys and women just like him. And so what we decided to do is that we wanted to empower actually our style advisors in store to have all the information that usually we would have about our customer on mobile, online, and to bring that information to the store. And that whether they're buying in store or online, or whether they're buying on mobile, it all links to that same core information. And in some ways, what I realize is that that is what Frank & Oak is. It's that core information base, and we have 1.5 million of those. And if we can take that and funnel it across the channel, that's how we're going to continue to build our brand. Now, when it comes to in-store technology, Ali's company have been doing some really innovative stuff, and we looked at a lot of different people when it came to how do we empower our style advisors to have all the information to make the right recommendation. And I really want you guys to discover the tools that he's had, because it's really made a big difference in our business. So I'll leave it to you. Right?
So my name is Ali Asaria from Tulip Retail. When Ethan's company contacted us about their vision for their new physical stores, we were extremely excited as a company because they had built such a great brand online, and they were coming to us saying, we don't have any of the legacy of most physical retailers who have all of this weight and investments in the way they've done shopping in stores in the past. If we're going to build a store, we want it to be significantly different than anything anyone's seen before, and it has to transcend these kinds of channel barriers that we traditionally see in this space. And we love this idea of an online retailer saying, how do we reinvent the store if we don't have any of that history? And so Tulip, the background for our company is we actually built one of the biggest e-commerce companies in Canada and beat Amazon in this kind of diapers.com world. And so I'd spent my life for about 8 years building a retailer and talking to vendors and learning about what's available out in the industry in terms of technology. And as we spent time at Tulip talking to a whole bunch of retailers, we focus a lot in fashion here in New York and then in specialty retailers across North America. The thing we kept hearing was that their shoppers have changed, right? We live in a world that's post-e-com. Every single shopper has a mobile device in their hands. Store associates are telling their brands that they're actually afraid of the customer. The customer, now more than ever before, knows more about the brand, knows details about the product, has detailed questions, and store associates are interacting with these customers, and they themselves don't have the same tools. And so a lot of the thesis of Tulip was around, how do we build a next generation shopping experience? And specifically, one of our key viewpoints is that the physical store matters in a world, I mean, we live in Tulip in a technology world where everyone says, isn't e-commerce going to replace all of the stores? And no, I mean, we all know that 90% of shopping happens inside a physical store. The first time I ever bought something from Frank & Oak, I had to try it on the first time. I knew my size after I could buy online, but there's this human tactile experience that happens in a brand that transcends something that you can just show digital. But I think the thesis that we keep seeing with brands like Frank & Oak is that they're not thinking of omnichannel in this idea of the synthesis of channels that have to interact. They're thinking, we are a brand and our customer exists across all of those, and they're not omnichannel, we are just a brand, and we have to reach our customer in every way that that customer wants to interact with us, sometimes in person and sometimes online, and how do I make those experiences intersect and really reflect what we care about? The other thing that we keep hearing from companies that we work with in this space is that if we don't invest in our stores, we become meaningless, right? A lot of the biggest brands we're working with are saying that we can't just build a website and try to compete directly with some of the biggest e-commerce players in the world. Our biggest asset is that we have real physical stores. And most importantly, I think, is that we have real human people. And I think that's the thing that gets forgotten when we talk about next generation store experiences. We talk about things like beacon and Wi-Fi tracking, and we have a whole bunch of neat dashboards. The retailers we're talking to are saying, all of that discussion, that beaconing and these new kinds of personalization recommendation engines, they gave me a bunch of neat graphs, but I haven't transformed my store. The key, we believe, is the store associate. And the thing you might have noticed, what I love about when Ethan talks about his stores is he doesn't talk about his store associates as store associates. They're non-transactional. They're not shop people who do checkout. They are style advisors. And that's the theme that we keep bringing up, I think, and we keep hearing from our retailers. Is they're saying, how do we empower the highest order function of my store associates? Big brands know that if their customers want to get access to a red item in this size, with this style, they can get it from multiple channels. The store's purpose is no longer just a place to distribute inventory. It's a way to converse with a customer. It's a way to interact and share a brand story. But the only way we can do that is if we give the best tools possible to our store associates. And so what we're seeing here, right, is that helpful store associates sell 5 times more. Customers over and over, in the next slide you'll see, are saying that they're 97% more likely to buy more. I'm sure we've all had that experience going into a store where someone was just extremely helpful, could tell you the actual story behind how that product was manufactured, and you leave there satisfied and buying more. How do we make that happen with better tools is a big question that Tulip's trying to answer alongside great fashion brands like Frank and Oak. And customers are expecting it. When we survey customers, and we've seen some of this across the industry, 80% of customers are saying, I expect my store associates to have better tools and have mobile devices in their hands. But how do we give that technology? That's a lot of the question I think we're trying to answer over time. What are those experiences? I think that's the neatest part of this conversation, right? If you're an online player opening physical stores, you have this neat liberty. You can kind of do whatever you want. You don't have any legacy, there aren't a bunch of silos, you don't have to get budget across 3 different dimensions. You can just build the store however you want, sort of. But I think a lot of the big fashion retailers that we're talking to that started physical, they're saying, look, I have an in-store digital team, and then I have an e-com team that has different assets, and then there's an IT team that needs to buy in, and there's a merchandising and branding aspect to this, and I need everyone to get aligned, and I need those budgets to get aligned. And I think what often happens, I think, for some of the world's best retailers is they get paralyzed in that, right? They might build a 5-year roadmap, and I've seen these 5-year roadmaps where we're going to connect all of our back-end systems and invest in these things 3 years from now, and then we'll start handing out tablets to our store associates in year 4. And what happens is we live in a world where 4 years from now, I don't know what those devices will look like anymore. We need to try things now. And so one of the neatest things I've learned from companies like Ethan's is not just thinking about how do we take the best of digital and bring it into the store in terms of product recommendations and social and that kind of conversation where store associates can SMS with their customers, which is super, super awesome. I think the other part of the culture of e-commerce that's coming into the store is this idea of test and learn. Can we deploy things in 6 stores in 6 weeks and start measuring ROI immediately rather than build a 5-year roadmap and start deploying technology that our store associates won't use 3 years from now, right? Is a big question. And one of the neatest things that we're seeing is that it's some of the simplest things that drive the highest ROI. And this is the key, right? Is it all has to be around numbers. Some of the biggest interesting lifts that we've seen in some of our best retailers is in one of our biggest deploys, we're seeing versus a control study, an A/B test, the average store associate with a mobile device in their hands that can answer questions around the history of that product and details around how it was manufactured and the details of what's involved in it. They're selling an average of 30% more per store associate versus the control that doesn't have a tablet. This kind of difference is so meaningful that this is what's driving the full deploys inside retailers that we're talking to. We're seeing an average of 30% higher buyer repeat when store associates are able to text and SMS their customers. But the technology that Tulip builds enables those store associates to SMS a customer not from their own personal device, but from an SMS number that's in the cloud, so that if they hand off that device to someone else, the numbers flip, and if that store associate leaves, it gets handed back to the brand. This is where it gets really interesting, right? Is when we start saying, what if I had a neat mobile platform where I can try things out like this? I want to build a little mosaic of a neat style profile for my customer based on what's in their closet in the past. And I want to message that to them over SMS or email in a really quick way. And I want to see that feedback immediately. These kinds of technologies and this kind of next generation of bringing e-commerce into the store and unifying those challenges, that's what's enabling these types of conversations. And I think it's just so, so exciting. And so I think, hopefully, if you heard one thing from both of us, is this thesis that I'm really, really passionate about, is that the future of technology is people. That's why we called our company Tulip. We love this idea of the humanity within technology, and I think that's really the next generation of the intersection of fashion and brand and people. And this conversation, I think, that we keep hearing about, I think especially I loved what they were talking about at AMI, this idea that it's about empathy and socialness and friendship. How do we enable that with this kind of next generation of technology without reducing the humanity? I think is a really interesting conversation, and a conversation I'd love to keep having with you if you want to reach out with us after. I'd love to show you a demo of some of the things we're doing. And so that's kind of the story of Tulip and Frank and Oak. We'd love to take some questions.
Yeah, so I can't speak about any specific metric, but I would say we definitely track traditional metrics, if you can call them. I think that some of them are still very relevant, and I would say that the thinking behind having monthly content and monthly collection is how much engagement can you get from that customer, which can be measured very easily, and how many orders, let's say purchases, are you getting, let's say on an annual basis. So what we found out is that when you think about like a male shopper, when is it time for me to go shop? I don't know. When is the time that the new collection is in someone's store? I have no idea. But with Frank and Oak, you know that every single month on the first of the month, you'll have the content, the products there. So we found that's extremely powerful because it's rational and it brings the customer back at a higher rate than if we didn't have that model. Yeah, so I mean, like, we don't re-merchandise styles, right? So, but we do repeat styles, right? So obviously, some products are really popular, so we'll bring them back. But we tend to try to stay as much away from that as possible. So we're actually fairly disciplined to not depend on one product, but to actually measure more the customer's value. Like, that's the way that we measure success, so that we kind of move away from this product is worth, like, it's a $2 million business, to this customer, that's how much he's worth. But of course, you know, there's a strong component of Frank and Oak that we still have merchandisers and planners, right? We still need these experts to that part of the business. It's just that they're on a different cycle, and they plan for the product to stay available for a different period of time. But once you roll that into the design cycle as well as into the way the products are launched, it makes a big difference. It means that, like, when you go on the site, the product is always rotating, and it's basically sells out. But at all times, we always carry 2 collections at the same time, right? So we actually expect the product to stay for about 2 months. Of course, a portion of it will sell out within the first week, but then it kind of keeps on going. So I think in some ways it's interesting because we've been learning a lot about how to do that in the last 3 years, because as I said before, we started from this idea of content, so we didn't necessarily think about, well, what are the challenges of bringing new SKUs on a monthly basis? What does that mean for your inventory and for your planning? We didn't really think about that, but I think in some ways that's the reason why we did it this way. But we realized it's extremely effective to drive engagement, and it's actually very effective to actually manage inventory as well that way. Well, once again, I can't really share that piece of data. I don't know anyone in this room who would share that piece of data, but I mean, I think that the thing that's interesting, guys, is that, like, I'm not necessarily saying that the way we do things is the answer to everything, right? I just think that it works really, really well, and it just creates a new experience for customers that they didn't have before. Now, the one thing I could say, though, is that the way that you work like that, we don't buy in deep quantities and let it sit on our floor for like 4 or 5 months and have to do something with it. Because we work on a monthly basis, we're always readjusting the assortment, we're always readjusting the product, which actually is very effective in terms of, like, inventory management and, like, promotion management. But of course, just like any retailer, at some point we do have some leftovers. Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, a lot of people get stuck in the technologies. Like, I think a lot of people that started online, they kind of have, like, a tech DNA, you know, like, because if you look at the people that they need in that company to run that company, they tend to have more developers, logistics people, so I think they have that mentality, and they're like, oh, let's apply that to in-store. Whereas, like, the in-store experience is completely different than the online experience, and you have to recognize that. So I think that I would always say is start from your customer, and start from, like, what are they looking for when they have a relationship with your brand? Is it personal touch? Is it, like, access to thousands of products? And I think it's all different for different people, but the only thing I know is that I don't think that people want to walk into a store where there's, like, 50 screens. You already have that. You have a screen in your pocket, right? So I do think that store experiences still have to be about the human touch and about the values. And in some ways, the reason why a company like Frank & Oak is looking at physical retail is because that is the lifestyle of a customer that shops at Frank & Oak. So by going the opposite way and putting a lot of technology into that store, it defeats the purpose of the lifestyle. Well, I mean, I definitely think that, like, Frank & Oak is a complex business. You know, I think that because we design our own product, we fulfill ourselves, and we also control the experience. It's amazing because we have full control of the entire experience and product. But of course, it means that within Franken we have departments for all of these, and you have to get all these people working together. I think at scale, it's an incredible machine, but when you're a startup, it is complicated. And I think that what we realize is that if we push too hard on the sales side, then actually we can't deliver. Or like if we push too hard on one front, then something else, it's kind of like a pizza a little bit, you know? So I think that what we've learned in the last 3 years is to kind of move everything at a consistent rate and improve everything at a consistent rate versus like stretching one direction, and that kind of keeps everything together. Because once like one part of the experience breaks, you can't really deliver that really simple and easy experience anymore. I mean, I think that like for our guy, bars are cool. I think that's the one thing. But I would say beyond that, what's interesting is that we're really, like when I say that we're like, you know, a media company, we're like really committed to it. It's not like, oh, we do some media, we have this print magazine. Like, we want to have original programming across every single Franken platform. And we realized that you need a space, like a space like this actually, where you can actually bring people, whether they're speakers, artists, or things like that, where people can interact with these people. Because once again, I don't want to bring people to my store and show them a screen and a video, right? They can already look at that at home. And that's the reason why we have these community spaces. So it's not really about a bar or a coffee shop or whatever it is. It's about recognizing that even within the physical space, there's a way to bring content. I mean, the way that it is that there's a way to separate the store and the bar. So like, once basically we start serving alcohol, we can actually close off the store if we want. We serve coffee during the day, so the logistics work out, let's just say. Toronto store, actually, the picture that you guys see is not a pop-up shop. That's a permanent store. I mean, once again, why not? You know, I think that like, there's no one way for us to do things, and there's no one way to do retail, and there's no one way to do e-commerce. So the reason why we're doing pop-up shops is just because it gives us an agility and a speed to market and a way that we can adapt our experiences as we grow. We don't have the answers to everything. Like, do I know at 100% what is the perfect in-store experience? No, but I know to build the kind of organization that within the next 18 months we'll get there. And that's the reason why we do pop-up shops. Yeah, so the customer definitely shops across all the platforms. Like, this is something that's true. We can measure it because like across all of our experiences, customers actually log into their account. So we can track whether you're buying, let's say as an example, like just to give you guys an example, when you buy into the Franken store, if you want to, you can actually return that online. You don't have to go back to the store. You can ship it to online, call our customer service online, and they have that order and they can refund you, right? So what it does is that customers just don't think about that anymore. Like, they don't think about that logistics of in-store to mobile to online, and they just go across. And I think that it also really caters to our customer, because we're looking at like, you know, a technology-centric 27-year-old. So for him, this is like, he expects company to be able to do that. He expects every single company to be as easy to use as Uber. And I think he's frustrated when he can't do that. But definitely like across all the channels. And that's the reason why like, we don't look at, let's say, oh, now we're adding retail, so now we can grow the business by this much. It's more like the addition of a different channel makes that you as a customer ends up spending more across the different channels.